Lieutenant Alex Kowalski had seen enough frontier establishments to know that the Crimson Fong was exactly the kind of place where asking too many questions could get you spaced without ceremony, but his xenobiology research had led him to some questionable locations before. Deep Space Station Omega-9 existed in the legal gray area between human colonial space and the Outer Rim territories, where beings of various species gather to conduct business that wouldn't be welcome in more civilized systems. Remember, Lieutenant, his research supervisor Dr. Harrison Webb had said during the mission briefing, the Sanguinari are supposed to be extinct. If you find evidence of survivors, maintain professional distance and gather data only. These aren't subjects for cultural exchange, they're specimens for scientific analysis. Alex adjusted his portable bioscanner and pushed through the tavern's entrance, immediately hit by the distinctive atmosphere of a place designed to accommodate species with unusual environmental needs. The lighting was kept deliberately dim, the air recyclers hummed with filtration systems designed to process a dozen different atmospheric preferences, and the background noise carried the multilingual chatter of beings whose homeworlds were scattered across the galaxy. His target sat alone in the darkest corner booth, exactly as his informant had described. Even in the Crimson Fong's deliberately shadowy environment, she was striking, midnight black hair that seemed to absorb the surrounding light, skin so pale it appeared to have its own subtle luminescence, and an elegant bearing that suggested both grace and carefully controlled danger. Alex's academic mind immediately began cataloging details that matched historical descriptions of the Sanguinari species. The bone structure was consistent with records from before the Purge Wars, the bioluminescent skin patterns were exactly as described in pre-extinction documentation, and when she lifted her drink to her lips, he caught a glimpse of the elongated canine teeth that had given the species their fearsome reputation. Fascinating, Alex murmured, adjusting his bioscanner's settings to capture genetic readings from a safe distance. That was his first mistake. The woman's head snapped up with predatory precision, her dark eyes locking onto his position with the kind of awareness that suggested enhanced senses far beyond human normal. Alex felt his heart rate spike as he realized he'd been detected, his covert observation blown by equipment that probably registered on her species' enhanced hearing. She rose from her booth with fluid grace, moving through the tavern's dim lighting like shadow-given form. Alex's survival instincts finally kicked in as she approached his table, her expression shifting from casual wariness to focused attention that reminded him exactly why the Sanguinari had been feared throughout the galaxy. "You're scanning me," she said, her voice carrying accents that Alex's linguistic training couldn't quite place. "That's either remarkably stupid or remarkably brave. I haven't decided which." "I apologize," Alex said, raising his hands in what he hoped was a peaceful gesture while his scanner continued recording her biosignatures. "I'm Lieutenant Alex Kowalski, xenobiologist with the Human Colonial Research Division. I'm conducting studies on supposedly extinct species, and I." "Supposedly extinct," she repeated, her lips curving into what might have been a smile if it hadn't revealed those unmistakable fangs. "How diplomatic. And what exactly does the Human Colonial Research Division plan to do with genetic samples from species that are supposedly extinct?" Alex felt sweat forming on his palms as he realized that her question carried implications he hadn't fully considered. "Academic research into biodiversity preservation and historical species documentation," he said, which was technically true even if it wasn't the complete story. "Academic research," she said, moving closer until he could see that her pale skin held subtle patterns that shifted color with her emotional state. "Tell me, Lieutenant Alex Kowalski, have you ever met one of the supposedly extinct Sanguinari before?" "No," Alex admitted, his scientific curiosity warring with his growing awareness that he might be in serious danger. The last confirmed sighting was over 50 years ago, and most xenobiologists consider the species extinct following the systematic persecution campaigns of the Purge Wars. "Systematic persecution," she repeated, her fangs now fully visible as her expression shifted to something that looked distinctly predatory. "Also a diplomatic way to describe attempted genocide." Alex felt the conversation sliding toward territory where his academic objectivity wasn't going to protect him. The woman stepped closer, her movements carrying the fluid grace of someone accustomed to being dangerous, and Alex found himself staring at those remarkable fangs as she prepared to make whatever point she was building toward. "Tell me, Lieutenant," she said, her voice dropping to tones that seemed to vibrate through his bones, "what do you see when you look at these?" She bared her fangs fully, leaning close enough that Alex could see the intricate enamel patterns that seemed to catch and reflect the tavern's crimson lighting. Every instinct he developed during years of frontier research screamed at him to back away, to treat this as the threat display it obviously was. Instead, his scientist brain took control of his mouth. "You have beautiful fangs," Alex said. The words hung in the air between them like a dropped star, completely derailing whatever intimidation scenario she'd been orchestrating. Alex watched in fascination as her pale skin suddenly flushed the most extraordinary shade of purple he'd ever seen, color bleeding up from her neck to her cheeks in patterns that transformed her from fearsome predator to flustered young woman in the space of a heartbeat. She stared at him with an expression of absolute shock, her mouth still slightly open to display the fangs he'd just complimented, her entire demeanor shifting from threatening to bewildered. What?" she said, her voice losing all its predatory undertones and taking on a note of confused vulnerability that made Alex realize he'd just accomplished something unprecedented. "Your fangs," Alex repeated, his xenobiologist instincts taking over despite the surreal nature of the situation. "They're remarkably well developed. The enamel formation is perfect, the neural integration appears seamless, and the biomechanical efficiency must be extraordinary. From a purely anatomical perspective, they're absolutely beautiful." Her purple blush deepened until her entire face was glowing with bioluminescent embarrassment, and Alex realized that his casual academic compliment had just cracked through whatever careful persona she'd been maintaining. "No one has ever." She began, then stopped, touching her fangs unconsciously while staring at him with an expression that suggested she was reevaluating everything about their encounter. "Called them beautiful?" Alex asked, genuinely curious now that the immediate threat seemed to have evaporated into mutual confusion. "Called them anything positive," she said quietly, her purple blush gradually fading to a more normal pale luminescence. "Most people see weapons, or predatory adaptations, or things to be feared. You see, beauty." Alex looked at her. Really looked, beyond the intimidating reputation and the fearsome adaptations, and saw someone who had probably spent her entire life being judged by features she couldn't control. "I see evolutionary perfection," he said honestly. "Specialized biomechanical structures that represent millions of years of development, integrated into a being who has survived against incredible odds. How could that not be beautiful?" Her expression shifted through several emotions too quickly for Alex to track, finally settling into something that might have been wonder mixed with cautious hope. "You're not what I expected from a human researcher," she said, settling into the chair across from him with movements that no longer carried any hint of threat. "And you're not what I expected from one of the supposedly extinct sanguinari," Alex replied, then paused. The conversation that followed Alex's unexpected compliment was unlike any xenobiological interview he'd ever conducted, partly because Vera seemed as curious about him as he was about her species, and partly because her embarrassed purple blush kept returning whenever she caught him looking at her fangs with obvious scientific fascination. "So the Human Colonial Research Division believes the sanguinari are extinct," Vera said, stirring her drink with a finger that seemed to absorb some kind of energy from the liquid. "That's actually helpful for our survival, if I'm being honest." "Survival?" Alex asked, adjusting his bioscanner to record their conversation while trying not to be obvious about continuing his genetic analysis. "Vera, how many of your people are still alive?" "More than the galaxy thinks, fewer than we need to maintain healthy genetic diversity," she replied, her skin patterns shifting to colors that Alex was learning to read as thoughtful consideration. "We've been hiding for over a century, scattered across frontier systems and pretending to be other species when necessary." Alex felt his understanding of the situation shifting as he realized he wasn't just documenting a supposedly extinct species, he was talking to a refugee whose people had been systematically hunted to near extinction. The Purge Wars weren't as successful as the historical records suggest. "The Purge Wars were successful enough," Vera said, her patterns darkening with what Alex suspected was old pain. Entire worlds burned, genetic databases destroyed, cultural centers turned to ash. Those of us who survived learned to hide everything that marked us as sanguinari. But not your fangs, Alex observed, noting how she unconsciously touched them whenever discussing difficult topics. Fangs can be explained as cosmetic modifications or genetic quirks from a dozen different species, Vera said, then paused as her skin flushed purple again. Most people are too focused on being afraid of them to look closely enough to recognize sanguinari biomarkers. Alex found himself studying the subtle bioluminescent patterns in her skin with growing appreciation for their complexity. Your camouflage abilities are remarkable. The color shifting seems to be tied to emotional states, but there are underlying patterns that suggest much more sophisticated bioelectric capabilities. You're still scanning me, Vera said, but her tone carried amusement rather than threat. Does your research equipment tell you what those capabilities actually do? Energy absorption and processing, Alex said, reading from his scanner's analysis. Your bioelectric signature suggests you can metabolize various forms of energy directly rather than relying solely on conventional nutrition. Very good, Vera said, her patterns brightening with what looked like approval. Though, vampiric blood drinking makes for more dramatic stories than bioenergetic symbiosis with willing donors. Alex felt academic excitement overriding his caution as he realized the implications. You don't need to feed on blood specifically, you can absorb bioelectric energy from any willing donor through direct contact. Among other energy sources, Vera confirmed, extending her hand toward him. May I demonstrate? Alex hesitated, his training warring with his curiosity. Everything he'd been taught about frontier research emphasized maintaining distance from unknown species, but Vera's offer represented a chance to gather data that could revolutionize understanding of bioenergetic processes. Will it hurt? He asked. It will feel warm and slightly tingly, Vera said, her skin patterns cycling through what he was learning to recognize as gentle amusement. I'm not going to drain your life force, Alex. I just want to show you what sanguinari feeding actually involves. Alex extended his hand, feeling the warmth of her skin as their fingers touched. Immediately, he felt a subtle tingling sensation, like mild electrical current flowing between them. But instead of feeling drained, he felt energized, as if some of her vitality was flowing back to him in exchange for whatever she was absorbing. It's symbiotic, he realized, watching his bioscanner register the energy exchange between them. You're not just taking energy, you're sharing it. Exactly, Vera said, her fangs visible as she smiled genuinely for the first time since he'd met her. Sanguinari feeding creates mutual enhancement when done properly. The donor feels revitalized, the sanguinari gains sustenance, and both parties benefit from the bioelectric harmony. Alex found himself staring at her fangs again, this time with complete scientific fascination rather than fear. The fangs aren't weapons, they're precision bioelectric interfaces for creating intimate energy connections. Vera's blush returned with intensity that made her skin glow, and Alex realized his continued focus on her fangs was affecting her in ways that went beyond simple embarrassment. You keep looking at them, she said quietly, her voice carrying vulnerability that suggested she was stepping outside her comfort zone. Alex, most people are terrified of sanguinari fangs, or they fetishize them in ways that make me uncomfortable. But you look at them like they're beautiful examples of evolutionary perfection. Alex suggested, still holding her hand and feeling the continuing energy exchange between them. Like they're part of me that you actually appreciate, Vera said, her patterns cycling through colors that Alex suspected indicated deep emotional significance. Do you have any idea how rare that is? Alex began to understand that his casual compliment had touched something much deeper than simple vanity. Vera, how long has it been since someone said something positive about your sanguinari features? Decades, she said simply. When you're pretending to be other species to survive, you learn to hide everything that makes you obviously different. The fangs, the bioluminescence, the energy absorption, all of it becomes something to camouflage rather than celebrate. The conversation was interrupted by raised voices from across the tavern as several Vorthan traders began arguing over territory rights, their discussion escalating toward the kind of violence that made frontier establishments exciting and dangerous in equal measure. Vera's demeanor shifted instantly, her casual friendliness replaced by the watchful alertness of someone accustomed to danger. "Alex," she said quietly, "we should leave. Now." "Why?" Alex asked, then caught sight of several figures moving through the tavern's shadows with the purposeful coordination of people who had been watching their conversation. "Because word travels fast on Omega-9, Vera said, her bioluminescent patterns shifting to colors that Alex was learning to associate with serious concern, and there are people who pay very well for information about surviving sanguinari. Alex felt cold realization settling in his stomach as he understood that his research mission had just become a survival situation. Bounty hunters? Corporate bioacquisition teams, Vera corrected, rising from their table with fluid grace that reminded him exactly why her species had evolved to be formidable predators. Companies that specialize in harvesting rare genetic material for commercial applications. As they moved toward the tavern's rear exit, Alex caught glimpses of the figures trailing them, beings in corporate security gear carrying equipment that looked suspiciously like the biosampling devices his own research division used for field collection. "Vera," he said as they reached the back corridor, "I think my research supervisor may have provided more information about my mission than I realized." "What do you mean?" she asked, her fangs now visible as her expression shifted to focused alertness. "I mean," Alex said, pieces of an uncomfortable puzzle falling into place, Dr. Webb may have been more interested in live specimens than historical documentation. Vera's skin patterns flashed bright red, the first time Alex had seen that color from her, and somehow he suspected it didn't indicate anything good. Alex's growing suspicions about his research mission crystallized into uncomfortable certainty when his comm unit activated with an incoming priority message from Dr. Webb, timed perfectly to arrive just as he and Vera were trying to escape the tavern's rear exit. "Lieutenant Kowalski," Webb's voice carried through the device with barely contained excitement, "preliminary bioscanner data indicates successful contact with a sanguinari subject. Outstanding work. Proceed to Collection Protocol 7 immediately, we have corporate partners standing by for comprehensive biological analysis." Vera's skin patterns blazed bright crimson as she heard the message, her fangs fully visible in an expression that Alex realized was genuine anger rather than mere threat display. "Collection Protocol 7, she repeated, her voice carrying dangerous undertones. "That doesn't sound like academic research, Alex." "It's not," Alex admitted, feeling sick as he understood how thoroughly he'd been manipulated. Webb positioned this as species documentation, but Collection Protocol 7 is for live specimen acquisition and detailed biological sampling. "Biological sampling," Vera said, her bioluminescent patterns now cycling through colors that suggested she was processing multiple layers of betrayal and threat. "Alex, do you know what happened to the last sanguinari who underwent comprehensive biological analysis by human researchers?" Alex felt cold dread settling in his stomach. "What happened?" "She died," Vera said simply. Slowly, over the course of months, as they harvested her bioelectric organs piece by piece to understand how to synthesize sanguinari abilities for other species. The weight of what he'd unknowingly walked into hit Alex like a physical blow. "Vera, I didn't know. I thought I was documenting your people's survival for historical preservation, not serving them up to corporate bioharvesters," Vera finished, but her angry red patterns were beginning to cycle toward other colors that suggested she was reading his genuine distress. "Alex, the question now is whether you're going to follow your supervisor's orders or help me get off this station before his corporate partners decide to collect their specimen." Alex's comm unit chimed again with another message from Webb, "Lieutenant, sensor readings indicate you've moved away from the subject. Return to collection position immediately. This is a direct order." "Collection position," Alex repeated, understanding finally dawning. "He's been tracking my bioscanner remotely. Webb knows exactly where we are." Vera's patterns shifted to deep purple, not the embarrassed blush he'd seen earlier, but something darker that suggested serious concern. "Alex, we need to leave this station now. Do you have access to transport? The research shuttle in Docking Bay 12, Alex said, making a decision that would probably end his career but felt like the only ethical choice available. But Webb will expect me to bring you there for collection. Then we'll have to disappoint him, Vera said, her fangs visible in what Alex was learning to recognize as her determined expression. Though I should warn you, helping me escape will make you an enemy of some very powerful people. Alex thought about the woman who had blushed purple at his compliment about her fangs, whose species had been nearly exterminated by systematic persecution, who had spent decades hiding fundamental aspects of herself just to survive. Some enemies are worth making, he said, deactivating his bioscanner and pocketing his comm unit. Vera, I'm officially refusing my orders. What do we do now? Her skin patterns blazed with colors Alex had never seen before. Relief, gratitude, and something that might have been hope all cycling through her bioluminescent displays in rapid succession. Now we find out whether a xenobiologist and a supposedly extinct vampire can outrun corporate bioacquisition teams through one of the galaxy's most dangerous space stations, Vera said, her expression carrying the kind of fierce determination that reminded Alex exactly why the Sanguinari had been feared throughout the galaxy. Their escape through Omega-9's maintenance corridors became a crash course in frontier survival skills Alex had never expected to need. Vera moved through the station's darker passages with predatory grace, her enhanced senses allowing her to detect pursuit teams before they became visible, while Alex's research training proved unexpectedly useful for accessing service tunnels and emergency routes. Corporate teams will have blocked the main docking bays, Vera said as they paused at an intersection of maintenance shafts. But there are smaller ports that service personal vessels, if your research shuttle can handle atmospheric exit without station assistance. It can, Alex confirmed, consulting his portable navigation unit while trying to ignore the sounds of coordinated search teams moving through the station's primary levels. Bay 12 is independent access, but we'll have to cross 3 main corridors to reach it. Leave that to me, Vera said, her skin patterns shifting to colors that seemed designed for camouflage in low-light environments. Alex, I need you to understand something about what we're doing. Once we leave this station together, you'll be implicated in helping a specimen escape corporate collection. Your career, your research credentials, probably your legal status, all of it will be compromised. Alex looked at her. Really looked at this remarkable woman whose species had survived near extinction through decades of hiding, whose bioelectric abilities represented evolutionary developments that could benefit the entire galaxy if properly understood and ethically shared, whose trust he had earned through a single honest compliment about features others feared. Vera, he said, 3 hours ago I thought the Sanguinari were extinct. Now I'm looking at someone whose people have been hiding from systematic persecution for over a century, whose survival represents one of the galaxy's most important discoveries, and whose trust means more to me than any career. Her patterns cycled through that extraordinary purple blush again, but this time it was accompanied by colors that suggested deep emotional gratitude. Alex, she said quietly, you realize that helping me escape probably means you can never go back to your old life. Webb won't just file a disciplinary report. He'll brand you as a traitor to human interests and a threat to corporate security. Then we'll have to make sure the life I'm choosing is worth the one I'm leaving behind, Alex said, surprising himself with how certain he felt about a decision he was making on the basis of a few hours' acquaintance with someone whose species he'd only read about in historical texts. Vera's skin blazed with colors that seemed to encompass every positive emotion she was capable of expressing, her fangs visible in a smile that transformed her entire face. In that case, she said, let me show you what a supposedly extinct Sanguinari can do when she's protecting someone who matters to her. What followed was 15 minutes of the most terrifying and exhilarating experience of Alex's academic career as Vera demonstrated that her fearsome reputation wasn't entirely fabricated. Her bioelectric abilities allowed her to interface with station systems in ways that created convenient distractions. Lights failing in corridors behind them, environmental controls creating temporary atmospheric disturbances that confused pursuit teams, and security sensors mysteriously malfunctioning at exactly the right moments. By the time they reached Docking Bay 12, Alex had gained a whole new appreciation for why the Sanguinari had been so feared during the Purge Wars, and why corporate interests were so eager to harvest their capabilities. "Alex," Vera said as they prepared to board his research shuttle, "where exactly are we going? Because I should mention that there are very few places in human space where a rogue researcher and an escaped Sanguinari specimen will be welcome." Alex looked at her, this extraordinary woman who had trusted him enough to reveal her true nature, whose survival represented hope for an entire species, whose purple blush when he complimented her fangs had started a chain of events that was reshaping his entire understanding of what mattered. "We're going to find your people," he said. "All of them. And we're going to document the survival of the Sanguinari in ways that protect rather than exploit them." Vera's patterns blazed with colors that seemed to light up the entire docking bay, her fangs visible in an expression of joy that made Alex understand why he'd found them beautiful from the first moment he'd seen them. "Alex Kowalski," she said, "I think this is the beginning of something extraordinary." Three days into their flight aboard Alex's research shuttle scientific method, their escape from Omega-9 had evolved into something resembling a very dangerous first date, complete with Vera's continued purple blushes whenever Alex made observations about sanguinary biology that she found particularly insightful. "Your ship's biolab is remarkably well equipped," Vera said, examining the genetic analysis equipment with the appreciation of someone who understood sophisticated technology. "Though I notice you've been very careful not to take any samples that could be used for cloning or synthesis." "I'm documenting, not harvesting," Alex confirmed, watching her skin patterns cycle through colors that suggested approval mixed with lingering caution. "Everything I'm recording is designed to prove sanguinary survival and cultural sophistication, not to enable corporate exploitation." "That's refreshing," Vera said, then paused as her comm scanner picked up incoming signals. "Alex, we have a problem. There are ships on intercept courses from 3 different directions." Alex checked his navigation display, feeling his stomach drop as he recognized the configuration patterns. "Corporate security vessels. Webb must have convinced them that I've been compromised by the specimen and need to be recovered along with you." "Compromised," Vera repeated, her patterns shifting to the deep red he'd learned to associate with anger. "Is that what they call it when someone develops ethics?" The pursuing ships were closing fast, their military-grade engines easily outpacing the scientific method civilian propulsion systems. Alex calculated intercept times and realized they had maybe an hour before being overtaken by forces that would consider both of them valuable corporate assets. "Vera," he said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "What?" she asked, though her skin pattern suggested she was already anticipating his question. "Your people, the other sanguinary survivors. Do they have somewhere safe we could reach? Because we're about to need sanctuary that's outside corporate jurisdiction." Vera's pattern cycled through complex combinations that Alex was learning to read as internal conflict. "There is a place," she said finally. "A hidden refuge on a rogue planet in unclaimed space. But Alex, bringing an outsider there violates every survival protocol my people have maintained for over a century. Even an outsider who's proven he'll risk everything to protect sanguinary interests." Alex asked, checking their pursuit situation and noting that the corporate ships were coordinating their approach with the efficiency of people who had done this before. "Especially an outsider who's that dangerous to our security," Vera said, but her tone suggested she was arguing with herself as much as with him. "Alex, if my people discover I've led corporate forces to our refuge." "They won't," Alex interrupted. "Because we're going to lose our pursuit before we get there." Vera's patterns shifted to curious spirals. "How exactly do you propose we outrun military vessels in a research shuttle?" "We don't outrun them," Alex said, studying the stellar cartography display with the focused intensity of someone whose academic career had included extensive training in exotic astronomical phenomena. "We lose them in the Kessler Nebula." Vera's skin went completely pale, her patterns freezing mid-cycle. Alex, the Kessler Nebula is an electromagnetic storm system that disrupts navigation and communication across multiple dimensional layers. Ships that enter it are never seen again. Ships with conventional navigation systems, Alex corrected, pulling up research data he'd gathered during previous xenobiology expeditions. But I've been studying reports of species that evolved in electromagnetic storm environments. Vera, your bioelectric capabilities, could you serve as a biological navigation system through electromagnetic interference? Vera stared at him with an expression that suggested she was recalculating everything she thought she knew about his sanity. You want me to guide us through a nebula that has destroyed every ship that's ever entered it? I want you to use abilities that your species evolved over millions of years to navigate electromagnetic environments that conventional technology can't handle, Alex said, his academic excitement overriding his survival instincts. Vera, this could prove that sanguinary bioelectric capabilities have applications beyond energy absorption. You could be living proof that your people's abilities make them invaluable partners rather than resources to be harvested. Her patterns cycled through what Alex had learned was her thinking rapidly display, processing implications faster than his human brain could follow. Alex, even if I could navigate the nebula, the corporate ships would never follow us in. They'd wait at the exit points. Which gives us time to reach your people's refuge and establish contact with other survivors, Alex said. Vera, we're not just running from corporate bioharvesters anymore, we're proving that the sanguinari are too valuable as allies to be treated as specimens. The approaching ships were now close enough that Alex could see their weapon systems charging, the universal signal that negotiation time was over. Decision time, Alex said, his hand hovering over the navigation controls. Trust conventional escape routes and hope we can outrun military vessels, or trust your abilities and prove that sanguinari evolution produced capabilities that no technology can replicate. Vera looked at the approaching ships, then at the swirling electromagnetic storms of the Kessler Nebula, then at Alex with an expression that suggested she was making a choice that would affect more than just their immediate survival. Alex, she said, her skin patterns blazing with colors he'd never seen before, I hope you realize that if this works, you're going to become the first human to witness abilities my people have kept secret for over a century. And if it doesn't work? Alex asked, setting course for the nebula's edge. Then we'll die together rather than live as corporate specimens, Vera said, her fangs visible in an expression that was equal parts determination and affection. Alex, there are worse fates than failing while fighting for something that matters. As the scientific method approached the Kessler Nebula's swirling electromagnetic barriers, Alex felt Vera's hand touch his arm, her bioelectric abilities immediately interfacing with the ship's navigation systems in ways that made every instrument panel glow with harmonious energy. Hold on, she said, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate with the nebula's electromagnetic frequencies. You're about to see what sanguinari evolution really accomplished. The corporate pursuit ship stopped at the nebula's edge, their commanders apparently unwilling to follow their quarry into electromagnetic storms that had claimed every vessel that ever entered them. But as the scientific method plunged into swirling energy fields that should have torn them apart, Alex felt Vera's consciousness expand to encompass the entire electromagnetic environment, guiding them through chaos with the instinctive grace of someone whose species had been born to dance with cosmic forces. Vera, he said, watching her skin patterns synchronize with the nebula's energy flows, you're not just navigating, you're conducting an electromagnetic symphony. Her purple blush blazed through patterns that made the entire ship's interior glow with bioluminescent beauty, and Alex realized that calling her fangs beautiful had been just the beginning of discovering what made the sanguinari extraordinary. The hidden refuge of the Sanguinari existed in a pocket of stable space within the rogue planet's electromagnetic field, a sanctuary that had been invisible to conventional sensors for over a century. As Alex followed Vera through the underground chambers carved from living crystal formations, he realized he was witnessing the survival of an entire civilization that the galaxy had assumed was extinct. "Welcome to Umbral Haven," Vera said, her skin patterns displaying pride mixed with nervous anticipation as she led him through corridors where other Sanguinari moved with the graceful efficiency of people who had rebuilt their entire society in hiding. "Alex, you're the first outsider to see this place since the Purge Wars ended." The community that greeted them was unlike anything Alex had imagined. Instead of the primitive refugee settlement he'd expected, Umbral Haven was a sophisticated research colony where Sanguinari scientists worked on projects that seemed decades ahead of galactic mainstream technology. Bioelectric energy networks powered everything from environmental systems to data storage matrices, while cultural preservation centers maintained libraries of knowledge that represented the accumulated wisdom of a species thought lost to history. "Elder Lyrian will want to meet you," Vera said, guiding Alex toward the community's central chamber where an ancient Sanguinari woman waited with the patient dignity of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected her people's survival. "But Alex, I need to warn you, bringing you here has created considerable controversy among my people." Elder Lyrian's appearance made Alex understand immediately why the Sanguinari had been both feared and revered throughout galactic history. Her bioluminescent patterns had crystallized into permanent configurations that spoke of centuries of accumulated wisdom. Her fangs were works of evolutionary art that seemed designed by nature as statements of perfect functionality, and her presence carried the authority of someone who had guided her people through their darkest period of near extinction. "Dr. Alex Kowalski," Elder Lyrian said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the chamber's crystal formations resonate with her words. "Vera tells me you complimented her fangs in a frontier tavern and then chose to abandon your career rather than deliver her to corporate bio-harvesters." "That's an accurate summary," Alex said, feeling somewhat inadequate in the presence of someone whose species had survived systematic genocide through careful planning and incredible sacrifice. "Interesting," Elder Lyrian said, her patterns shifting to colors that Alex suspected indicated careful evaluation. "Dar. Kowalski, in over a century of hiding from galactic persecution, no human has ever chosen Sanguinari welfare over their own interests. What makes you different?" Alex looked around the chamber, seeing Sanguinari faces displaying the kind of cautious hope that came from people who had learned not to trust easily, and realized that his answer would affect not just his relationship with Vera but the future of an entire species. "I'm not different," he said finally. "I just had the privilege of meeting someone who made me understand that appreciating what makes others unique is more important than protecting what makes me comfortable." Elder Lyrian's patterns cycled through what Alex hoped were positive colors. "Vera's fangs," she said. "You truly find them beautiful?" "I find them perfect examples of evolutionary sophistication," Alex replied honestly. "But more than that, I find them beautiful because they're part of someone whose intelligence, courage, and compassion have taught me that diversity of form reflects diversity of capability." Vera's skin blazed with that extraordinary purple blush, and Alex realized that even surrounded by her own people, his appreciation for her Sanguinari features still affected her deeply. "Dr. Kowalski," Elder Lyrian said, "Vera has proposed that you document our survival in ways that protect rather than exploit our people. She believes your research could help other Sanguinari emerge from hiding and reclaim their place in galactic society. Do you understand the responsibility such documentation would entail?" Alex felt the weight of what was being offered, the chance to revolutionize understanding of a species thought extinct, to help survivors reunite with scattered family members, to establish ethical protocols for interspecies cooperation that could benefit the entire galaxy. "I understand that I would be responsible for proving that the Sanguinari are too valuable as allies to be treated as specimens," Alex said. "That your bioelectric capabilities, your cultural sophistication, and your survival itself represent resources that should be shared through cooperation rather than harvested through exploitation. And if corporate interests continue to pursue you as a rogue researcher who has been compromised by specimen contact?" Elder Lyrian asked. Alex looked at Vera, whose skin patterns were cycling through colors that suggested she was holding her breath waiting for his answer. He thought about his old life, the academic security, the research credentials, the professional reputation he'd built over years of careful career advancement. Then he thought about what he'd discovered in 3 days with someone whose existence challenged everything he'd assumed about extinct species, evolutionary capability, and the possibility of finding love in the most unexpected circumstances. Then I'll prove that being compromised by ethical contact with other species makes researchers more effective, not less, Alex said. Elder Lyrian, I want to help your people reclaim their place in the galaxy. Not as subjects for study, but as partners in building better understanding between species. Elder Lyrian's patterns blazed with colors that seemed to light up the entire chamber, and Alex realized he'd passed some kind of test he hadn't known he was taking. Dr. Kowalski, she said, welcome to the first Sanguinari Human Cooperative Research Initiative in over a century. Let us discover what becomes possible when appreciation replaces exploitation. 2 years later, Alex stood in the joint research facility he and Vera had established on a neutral world in the Kepler system, watching human and Sanguinari scientists work together on bioelectric projects that were revolutionizing energy technology throughout the galaxy. Their documentation of Sanguinari survival had led to the emergence of dozens of hidden communities, the establishment of legal protections for supposedly extinct species, and diplomatic protocols that treated rare genetic capabilities as cultural heritage rather than commercial resources. Any regrets? Vera asked, approaching him with the graceful movements that still made his heart skip even after 2 years of partnership in both research and romance. Alex considered the question seriously. His relationship with Vera had ended his career with the Human Colonial Research Division, required him to testify before galactic tribunals about corporate bioexploitation, and demanded that he learn to navigate the complex social dynamics of a species whose emotional states were visible through their skin patterns. But it had also given him the chance to participate in the most important xenobiological discovery of the century, to help establish ethical standards for interspecies research, and to fall in love with someone whose intelligence and courage challenged him to be better than he'd ever imagined possible. Just one regret, he said, watching Vera's patterns shift to concerned purple. What's that? I regret that it took me 3 hours of conversation to work up the courage to tell you that your fangs were beautiful, Alex said, taking her hand and feeling the familiar warm tingle of their bioelectric connection. I should have said it the moment I saw you. Vera's skin blazed with that gorgeous purple blush that had started everything between them, her fangs visible in the smile that still made him understand why he'd found them beautiful from the very first moment. In that case, she said, her voice carrying the happiness of someone who had learned to trust that her most distinctive features were appreciated rather than feared, I'm grateful for frontier taverns, careless compliments, and xenobiologists who think evolutionary perfection is